Hey guys, Mr. Happy here, and this is going to be my first not video log since the fan festival began here in North America. I'm finally back home and ready to do some videos dedicated to specific pieces of information that we got from the fan festival. Now, I know a lot of you may have already seen a lot of the information or have heard it or read it somewhere, so if this is redundant to you, feel free to step away from the video now, but this is for anybody who may not know some of those things or would like to hear my thoughts on certain aspects, why they may be doing them, and what my general thoughts are on them. So for this first video, we're going to be talking about the most important thing that came out of Fan Festival, if you ask me, and that is the expansion for Final Fantasy XIV Patch 3.0, also known as Heavensward. Now, I made a video about what the names could be, Blue Sky of Ishgard, and I mentioned Heavensward in that video. I kind of ruled it out. It didn't really sound like an expansion name to me, but you know what? It is the expansion name, so it is what it is. I'm going to be going over all the information that I found that they unveiled there. There may be bits and pieces from the other panels, like the music panel and the lore panel, that may be left out here, but we're going to be going over the meat of what was unveiled about Heavensward. And one of the first thing is the name. They looked at it with the dragons and the dragoons themselves, as well as the city of Ishgard being the central plot point. One of the biggest things is that they said there would be multiple ways to get to the different heavens that are out there, and we're going to touch on what that might mean a little bit in this video as well. So the first bit of news means a lot to those of us who bought the game back in 1.0 and explored over to Coerthas, only to find that there was a fourth city-state that we couldn't enter, which was Ishgard, and we are finally going to be able to go there in this expansion. It is going to finally be the fourth accessible city-state. The actual area we're going to be going to is the Holy See of Ishgard, and no, C is not misspelled. Holy See is actually Latin for the word holy chair, so it's technically the Holy Chair of Ishgard, and I know the Catholic Church has a Holy See as well, so it seems to be drawing on Ishgard's extreme religious beliefs. Ishgard is an extremely religious city-state, so it's definitely a play on the Holy See in real life. There's going to be 1,000 years worth of history and lore that we're going to be able to go over when that expansion comes out. And I'm sure it's going to be explored through multiple quests, and it's going to be explained throughout the main story, and it's going to mainly involve the war with Dravania. The city is also not like any of the other cities we have, where they've now rebuilt since the Calamity. Ishgard has been at war for 1,000 years, long before we ever had to deal with Bahamut. So even though Coerthas was affected by all this, the city is in constant threat, and it looks a lot more war-torn than the city-states we're used to now. Another big thing is that outsiders of Ishgard are usually shunned, so you can expect the NPC dialogue and the quest dialogue to be a little bit different. They may not look up to you as much as the NPCs do in different parts of it. It's like, wow, you're the warrior of light. These guys, sure, they may appreciate that, but you can also expect to maybe be shunned a little by these guys, which was the exact wording of Yoshi P and his translator, Koji Fox. Another thing is that the rich and the poor are actually separated, so when you move about the city, you're probably going to see a difference in that, with the very bottom being where the poor people live, meaning it's going to look a lot more run down, and the upper levels being where the nobles live, the rich, being a lot more lush and lively in those areas. Now, as for plot points, we're just going to go over the couple of plot points that they brought up. The one is the 1,000-Year War, which we're going to be getting history and lore on, which I just mentioned. It's called the Dragon Song War, actually. And more specifically, they talk about the Wyrm King and his battle with Thordawn and his Knights 12, which, I mean, I'm sure everyone who's played Final Fantasy VII or has actually just knows about the Knights 12, Knights of the Round Table. We can expect that to be a major plot point as well. Those of you who played Final Fantasy XI, you're probably thinking Wyrm King and you're thinking Bahamut, but we've heard some other names, Nidhogg being one of them in the Dragoon questline. So expect a little bit more about finding out about the Wyrm King himself and how his war and how we can affect this Dragon Song War. Now, that's for the city and that's for the lore, but now we're going to be going over some of the actual new features, and I'm going to be giving my thoughts on those as well. And the first big one, it's got to be the level cap increase. I've been asked a lot, where do you think the level cap is going to go to? And I've had varying answers. I didn't think it would go all the way to 75 like Final Fantasy XI. The level cap is being raised to 60. So a total of 10 levels. We can expect some new class abilities as well as a couple of new job quests along the way. And keep in mind, this doesn't just include Disciples of War and Magic. Disciples of Hand and Land will see a level increase as well. So there's going to be a lot more leveling, and I had a feeling that they would do that. I'm assuming that 51 to 60 may be as long as 1 to 50. That is an assumption. That is not a fact, just making that clear. Because then that would definitely meet their expectation of we want as much content in Heavensward as was available at the beginning. Based on what they're showing, though, there is more than that going to be available. But, you know, let's move on to it a little bit. Last thoughts on the level cap being raised to 60. Solid 10 levels, I think, is okay. I'm curious how they're going to handle item levels and power creep with that. This is territory that, yes, Final Fantasy XI has item levels now, but it's not the same as the territory they're going here with the level cap increase and the item levels at the same time. Item level in Final Fantasy XI came after the level 99 cap was unveiled. It was something that was added to their expansion after the Abyssea areas. So I want to see how they handle having both of those systems in place simultaneously. One of the more exciting things to me, and I'm sure even Final Fantasy XI players and 1.0 players were excited to hear this, was the term massive new areas. And you couldn't see them, but I put air quotes around that. And I want to do that because the word massive is actually very, very important here. Much emphasis was put on the word massive. It was reiterated in the translation, the official translation, as very, very large new field areas. Likely meaning that they took feedback about the world in 2.0. Being kind of small and condensed, you know, taking one zone and breaking it up into 5 or 6 like Lenosha or Thanalan. And it seems that they may want to give the world a little bit more of a fluid feel, you know, like you're not constantly going through different zones. And that's what I'm hoping for when they say large new field areas. I don't know what their scale for large is, but the fact that they put so much emphasis on it means to me that we can expect them to be bigger than the current zones. Also, a few other things. The areas surrounding Korthus will become available. The Korthus we have now is only 1/5 the size of the one before. I don't know that it'll do that. It seems like they were mostly talking about the areas to the north of Korthus. So it's really hard to tell what they meant. There's at least a few new areas that we can expect to explore. And I mean, the whole north of Eorzea hasn't really been explored yet. And there's still areas to the east we haven't explored yet either. So I'm very, very curious to see how big these areas are, how many of them there are. I'm expecting a fair bit, about as much new land as there was back in the original launch, just less zone lines between it. Those are just my expectations based on these descriptions, guys. One big thing was also the idea of floating continents above the ground that the players can explore by, well, however you can reach them. They did mention flying, but they didn't come out and say flying mounts. They unveiled something else later that may be involved, but with the idea of these massive areas, I wouldn't put it past them to do flying mounts only available in these specific areas. Specifically, these floating continents were stated as quote-unquote beyond the sea of clouds, meaning they're going to be pretty high up in the air. So it's not just going to be the north half of Eorzea that we can explore. There's also going to be areas that aren't on the map high up in the sky where we can assume that there's dragons that live there or something along those lines that are also going to be added as new in-game areas. I'm very, very excited to hear about that as well. More specifically, they referenced the Final Fantasy VI floating continent, not the Final Fantasy III one, which, you know, the beginning of Final Fantasy III takes place on a floating continent. I was surprised to see that they didn't reference that one at all, so we may even be able to expect something similar to the Warring Triads being up there, being a strong plot point for this. I know that they said they were really going for originality here, but I mean, it's Final Fantasy. It wouldn't be beyond them to use a little bit of that fanfare, to use some of that past that they have in order to help develop stronger plot points in general. Another thing, really small, new beast tribes, which of course means new daily quests. They showed off a few of them, and to be honest, I'm curious, you know, because there was a question about the mammal jaw, and are we going to be seeing them in the expansion, the Kikrin, the beast tribes that we have in the game currently that don't have primals. We may expect to start seeing those in the expansion, seeing wild versions of those tribes with primals of their own. They also showed off a forest, and they very briefly mentioned, well, they sort of mentioned Chocobo Forest, but we've been told in the past that the Chocobo Forest of Final Fantasy XIV is vastly different because of the way that Ishgard handles the distribution of Chocobos, that the forest is not exactly what we think it is. So I'm going to put a question mark next to that one, not exactly sure that it means there's just going to be a flat-out forest full of Chocobos, but I'm interested to see what they mean, because they joked around and said chocolate forest. Like, oh, Choco... some sort of forest, a chocolate forest, of course. Yeah, no, it's not going to be a chocolate forest. Of course, with all this new land comes new plant and animal life, which we were expecting anyway. We can probably expect to see a few more things used, brought over from Final Fantasy XI. The areas look very much like that they showed off the four lands, look very much like the Argon areas to me, but a little different. They're not just your general forests with the same tree life and everything. They definitely had a unique feel, and it's a lot different because we're used to Korthus being the snowy area, and they didn't really show any snowy areas other than in the Heavensward trailer itself. So I'm actually very, very excited to see these new areas, and if they are really these massive new areas. I want to make a quick observation. This was not mentioned at all. I actually had a friend who mentioned this to me at the fan festival itself, and he noticed that in all the screenshots they were showing, in the video they showed of the Duranian Forelands, that no Aetherites were shown in their videos. I mean, they have mentioned in the past that looking into means of transportation other than Aetherites. This could be anything from faster mounts to flying mounts to just another type of teleport system. There's no way of knowing, really. I just thought it was interesting that the only Aetherite we saw, we did see one, it was in the Holy See of Ishgard. So, curious to see how that pans out. Hopefully we'll get some more information at the London Fan Festival this Saturday. Remember, this is only part one of everything we know Heavensward, so we're gonna definitely be expanding upon this over time. One of the new things, I mean, everyone was expecting this, a new playable race. They joked around and said it was gonna be the Vianga, I believe it was, which was a combination of Viera and Banga, two of Ivalice's races. But they just said no, they're gonna wait till they're ready to reveal Yugiri's face, which I'm assuming may be around 2.5. I'm pretty sure that they said somewhere in the final day that we wouldn't see Yugiri's face until the final, until 2.5, but I might just be remembering it wrong. I'll be sure to double check my sources on that, and when I do a video about the actual live letter from Sunday, I'll be sure to clear all that up for you guys, no worries. Multiple new jobs was another one, and multiple new jobs is something that I actually really want to touch upon, because before making this video, I noticed that Gamerscape, remember, they're a great website. They do a lot of Final Fantasy XIV news. They did an interview with Naoki Yoshida regarding the new jobs. They didn't, and you know what? They asked the question that a lot of people haven't been asking. Most people just want to know what the new jobs are. But they asked, we noticed that you said there's multiple new jobs, but not multiple new classes. That is actually very important. And Yoshi P even said you have a good eye for that. So we can actually expect that we may just be getting those second jobs for all those new classes, as opposed to getting a new class and getting a new job. I mean, they're probably assuming that 50 to 60 will take a pretty long time. So it's the equivalent that time may be efficient enough, or maybe sufficient, which would be the right wording, maybe sufficient enough to actually learn the job as you're leveling it up, as opposed to going all the way from 1 to 60 on a brand new class. I think it's actually a pretty good idea to not sort of force people to extend their game life by releasing a new class along with the new jobs, and just letting them kind of take the classes they already know or they may have some experience on, and level them with this new job that may fit a new role that they haven't been able to experience before on those classes. And if somebody hasn't leveled those classes yet, now they are going to gain access to 2 jobs. It does, of course, mean that we will start seeing more conflicting attribute points. Assuming they use the same attribute system where you have to choose where you want to go, it means that more jobs will be making the same choices that Summoner and Scholar had to before. Do I go 30 Ant, 30 Mind? Do I split down the middle? Do I throw some Piety in there? So we can expect a little bit more choice in that case, but a lot of people look at it as, what if I want to play both? And that could also be trouble as well. I do want to mention, I'm going to do a standalone video about my thoughts on this, but one of those jobs has been confirmed, sort of, as the Dark Knight. Its role is still unknown, but basically what happened was Mr. G, I can't, it's Gondai, I believe it's Mr. Gondai, but they said if you don't remember his name or you can't pronounce it, call him Mr. G. He said that he wanted to wear a Batman, he's like, oh, I wanted to wear a shirt that would have gave a hint about the new job, and then they told everyone it was a Batman shirt, which of course everyone went, you know, Dark Knight. He's like, I specifically like the Christopher Nolan one. So we basically got a Dark Knight confirmation. We don't know if it's a tank, we don't know if it's a DPS, we don't know any of that. But based on this information, it'll probably come off of an existing class. I would guess either Marauder or Gladiator. Marauder seems more likely if they're going to go for the two-handed aspect, and it could also be potentially a DPS version of a Marauder, which a lot of people have been wanting. People love even just DPSing as Marauder or DPSing as Warrior, so now you may even have an alternate You may have even more choices when it comes to that. If you really always wanted to be a DPS warrior, Dark Knight may eventually be up your alley, but that's all speculation. As much as we know pretty much that Dark Knight is coming, that guess right there that it would be a DPS class, a DPS job off of Marauder, is totally speculation and is not to be taken as fact. They're gonna touch upon the jobs more at the London Fan Festival this Saturday, so I'll be sure to do a part 2 of this video to let you guys know what we find out about those as well. Of course, all new primals. I didn't expect them to deviate away from their addition of new primals. Now that they've kind of gotten the original, I guess 8 or 9 out of the way. You know, they got Odin, Bahamut, and the original 6 from Final Fantasy XI out of the way. Now they have room to spread their wings a little bit and, you know, reach out to things like Alexander. There's so many. The Evilist ones like Andramelech, which is my favorite Evilist one. Zodiark, we already have some information on that. There's so many different ones they could go for, but we did find out that one of those will be a Final Fantasy XIV original. So if you see, if we end up eventually seeing a primal that you've never seen before in any Final Fantasy, it is because it is probably that one that is a Final Fantasy XIV original. Of course, new dungeons, they weren't going to not do that. Now, they said challenging new dungeons, and I think most of us who have played Final Fantasy XIV for a while now know that dungeons haven't been challenging since the original launch of the game. So I guess my only worry is why they use that exact wording, challenging new dungeons. Maybe they're expecting that the difficulty will be similar to when the game first came out, back when nobody was geared for the first 2 dungeons, Wanderer's Palace and Amdapor Keep, when they were actually fairly difficult. I'm just curious if that will follow in after, you know, the patches start coming out for 3.0. Of course, high-end raids, we expect it to be more 8 and 24 man. They have said they prepared more large alliance content. They did say that once the Binding Coil is done, they have more high-end raids like the Binding Coil of Bahamut planned for the expansion. We just don't have any more information about them yet. Remember, Coil will be ending in 2.4 and CT will be ending in 2.5. So don't expect them to be extensions of those stories. Expect them to have their own stories going forward about that. Free company airships was another thing. We've known about this for some time now, and they said they're going to be laying down the framework for implementing the initial systems into the game in 3.0, and that they will be expanded on 3.1, 3.2, you know, patch after patch, adding more and more features to what those airships can actually help you accomplish. And then new gear and recipes. These are a lot of these things are givens. You know, the new level cap, the new gear, the new recipes, and that's to go with the increase in level for both the Disciples of War and Magic, as well as the Disciples of Hand and Land. So that's all the information I have about Heavensward so far. Again, I'm going to be making a dedicated video about my opinions on the Dark Knight, although I did pretty much cover what I was going to cover in that video, so maybe I won't make it anymore. I just wanted to make one video regarding just the information we got about Heavensward and give some of my thoughts. Honestly, a lot of this stuff feels like a given. You know, new primals, new dungeons, new raids, multiple new jobs was a bit of a surprise. A new playable race isn't a surprise, but it is nice that they're adding new jobs and a new race. The massive new areas and the Ishgard also, you know, the massive new areas for me was the most exciting thing, to be honest, because it's not that I want super big, you know, gonna take me an hour to get from point A to B. I don't want that, but I do want areas to feel a little bit less disconnected like they are now. You know, you'll spend maybe 2.5 minutes going from one zone to the next if you're not just teleporting zone to zone to zone, you know. And teleporting zone to zone to zone takes a little bit away from the world. Even though the world has tons of unique places to go, you really don't have too much incentive to go to those places once you've maybe completed the few quests that are there, or unless you're maybe Atma grinding, you don't really get to take in the sights as much. I'm just curious what the scale is going to be, how the transportation is going to be. Are we going to get flying mounts, or the free company airships going to... There's so many questions that we still have, guys, and I am just really, really anxious to get more of that information. So be sure to stay tuned to my YouTube channel for more of that information. I'm going to include a brief bullet point thing at the bottom in the description, so in case you ever want to reference it. I'm most likely going to be editing this as we get more information about Heavensward, so definitely be sure to take it, look at it, and if you ever need to reference it, just enjoy it. If you have anything that you think I should add to that list, be sure to leave it in the comments below. Be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and share to my channel as well for more Final Fantasy XIV videos and just more videos in general. Be sure to check out the rest of my channel, and anyway, guys, until next time, until I have the next video out, thank you for watching. Take care.